Dr. Jaishankar, your thoughts on this? Would you say that let's reform the current system or let's build a new one altogether? And if we were to build a new one, whose ideas and values would shape this new system?
Well, I think the word broken may be too strong. It's like, the battery is discharged. It's running on very low energy. But it's also, I think, you need a different framework in a way. So you'll have to take the bits which work, and I wouldn't completely reject what we have, but obviously there's a very strong case for a very radical change. And we need a radical change because, look, it's a common sense proposition. If you take the UN, when the UN was invented, it had at least about approximately 50 members. We have 4 times the members. So it's a common sense proposition that you can't continue the same way when you have 4 times the members. We use the UN very often to illustrate that point. We've also seen, if you look at the last 5 years, all the big issues, in a way, we have not been able to find multilateral solutions. So the results are also, or the lack of results demonstrate the case for reform. But there's a larger, I think, global conversation and a global rebalancing as well, which is bigger than the UN, which is really, whose rules, how does it work? Because what has also happened is, in many cases, the rules have been gamed. We have today, we speak about globalization, for example, and the fact is that the world trading rules have been gamed. We have a lot of our challenges today also emanate from how countries have used that for their benefit at the expense of the international system.
But in your conversations with various stakeholders, while everyone tends to agree that there is a need for reform, is there the appetite to do what needs to be done to push for that reform?
I think there's if you poll countries, I think the sentiment for change is very strong. The problem is, in many cases, the very people who are the problem are also the people whose concurrence you need to do that reform. So that's where the problem lies. So if you're going to ask 5 countries saying, would you mind changing the rules so that you have less power? Guess what the answer is going to be? The answer, if they were wise, the answer would be something else. If they are short-sighted, the answer is what it is today.
Well, we'll look for funding. The last point that I'd like to make on this is the huge opportunity that India has. India showed deft diplomacy of the highest caliber on the G20 management. I hope my friends in Brazil can take a page from you, Minister. That this cycle of Indonesia, India, Brazil, South Africa is a great opportunity to put all these issues on the table and to do trade reform, to do finance reform, debt reduction, to do governance reform, and take on some of these issues. And India not only has that very goodwill, Minister, but also I would subject to you probably the strongest diaspora in the world. And I would like to be from a country that in the U.S. has the Indian ancestry people with running the World Bank, running Google, running Microsoft, number 2 job in the U.S. administration, and number 2 in the Republican Party. India has a lot to be proud of.
Absolutely, and taking from what you've said, this is for Dr. Jaishankar, countries will find solutions and partners who are willing to work with them. So we could say that it's not just a post-truth world, it's also a multi-truth world where we all have our own truths. For India, the truth is that we have a historical relationship with Russia that the West needs to accept. For US, you could say the truth is that they will give this relentless support to Israel no matter what. How do you then find a middle ground, and how do you impress upon your Western partners that they...
It will be everybody's endeavor to find middle ground. The reality in many cases is we won't find middle ground. We will find some ground, some common ground. But the idea that everybody would agree on the most important issues of the day is a bit of a fantasy. The fact is, competition is for real. You spoke about camp politics. Sometimes there's a logic to it. President Quiroga spoke about, how institutions are, antiquated and sticking with the old rules. I agree, but I think in addition to the old issues, there are also the new issues. I mean, if today there is, let us say, take the big debates of the day, connectivity, debt, trade. Now, how these are leveraged today? These are not necessarily all coming out of the West. So, the West, as the dominant force earlier, is largely responsible for what, where we are today. But I think the new players haven't helped. I mean, again, if you take UN Security Council reform, the biggest opposer is not a Western country. So let's get the totality of the problem right. So I think the reality is we'll have to battle bit by bit to create groups which will push for change. I would say, on many issues, you will get different combinations of countries. And we'll have to live with a long period of incremental progress before we get to some kind of landing point, because as Anwar Gargar said, you're not going to get a second San Francisco conference.
Right. There's been so much talk about values and shared values, but the fact is that in the current political landscape, values are increasingly looking less important, and countries pick and choose when to apply them. Case in point, again, the war in West Asia. Do you think it's time then to admit and accept that these relationships are based on interest, and while countries can compromise on values, they never compromise on interests?
Well, that's not something new. That was always the case. I mean, look at our own example. Very literally in our first year of independence, we put our trust on multilateralism and took the Kashmir aggression issue to the UN, and others made it into an accession issue. And they did it for geopolitical reasons. So the fact is, if you say, are people playing multilateralism? They always did. We've grown up. And so today look up, it's not like we should be against multilateralism. Multilateralism is a kind of lowest common denominator and anything above that. It will exist side by side with national interests, with the calculations and competitions of countries. But I also agree with Minister Janbari when he said there's a place for sentiment, for solidarity. I mean, the biggest thing which is happening in this country right now is the water, the Jal Jeevan mission. If you want to see international Jal Jeevan mission, you should go to Tanzania and see. I mean, we went and, we're doing fantastic water supply work in Tanzania. So I think there is it's at different levels. We shouldn't make it exclusive. But to the hearts and the pocket observation, I would say to add to that also the mind, that life is about hearts, life is about pockets, but life is also about thinking your way through, thinking for yourself, finding solutions. And when you spoke, can India be the bridge? I think India can also help the world by offering solutions from our own example, which, and the digital would be the most appropriate